Hey everyone, and welcome to Dominion Cards, the video series where we take a strategic, in-depth look at various cards from the board game Dominion. Today we're looking at Trading Post. This is a 5-cost action card from Intrigue, and it says trash 2 cards from your hand. If you did, gain a silver to your hand. Now let's start off by just focusing on some important details here about this card. So the trashing is not optional. If you play this card, you must try to trash 2 cards from your hand. And you only get the silver if you actually trashed 2. You don't get it if you trash less than 2. So, for example, if you only have 1 other card in your hand, you do get to trash that 1 card, but you don't actually get a silver for it. If one of the 2 cards that you choose to trash is a silver, then this is sort of like trashing a single card, because that silver goes straight back into your hand, or, well, a new silver goes into your hand to take place of the one that you trashed. Similarly, if you trash 2 silvers, then that is equivalent to just trashing a single silver overall. So, what can we say about Trading Post compared with other trashers? So, cards that trash 2 cards from your hand tend to be pretty good at getting you thin. So obviously, like we've seen Chapel, which trashes 4, and that's extremely good at getting your deck small very quickly. But there are other cards, like there's one in Intrigue called Steward, that trashes 2, and it's very good at getting your deck thin pretty quick. So Trading Post, at first glance, looks like it might be a card like that. However, it also gains you a silver, and what this means is that you're actually only reducing your total deck size by 1 card instead of 2. So it's not quite as fast at getting your deck small as you might think it is. Now, it will never actually get you very thin at all because of the way that it gains you silvers. And if you're prioritising trashing your junk and like your starting cards instead of those silvers, then you will actually end up with a fair number of silvers. Of course, trashing all 10 of your starting cards down to 5 silvers is still going to be better than not doing this. It's the same in that you've still got a bunch of treasure and stock cards in there. However, you've got a lot less of them and you're getting a little bit more money for it. So it's still an improvement. Now, Trading Post's main benefit is that it's sort of improving your deck in 2 ways at the same time. So it is trying to remove the junk from your deck by trashing 2 cards at once, and it also builds your economy over time, and it adds it in a permanent manner. Like if you compare to, for example, Moneylender, that thins your coppers away, and it gives you a big money boost, but it's not a permanent money boost, it only happens for that turn. Whereas Trading Post gives you the money now because the silver goes into your hand, but also that silver sticks around and will give you more money for the rest of the game. So the trashing is all right, because it's getting rid of 2 junks at the same time. Silver's using all of your economy from silver is not usually the greatest thing, just because it's possible to be more efficient. Right, gold is a lot better. However, in this case, the silvers do come to you for free, which makes it a lot better because you don't have to buy them. So the silvers are sort of undoing the value of the trashing a little bit, just because it's not actually getting rid of all of your stock cards. You're only halving the number of stock cards that you have ultimately, if you're using Trading Post mainly for your trashing. But you do get to focus on building your deck by buying all the action cards in the drawer and all the other things that you want, instead of having to keep spending time going in to buy more economy, because it's just giving you that directly. If you get junked by witches, for example, that are also in the kingdom, you can end up actually with quite a lot of silver in your deck. If trashing your 10 starting hands goes down to 5 silvers ultimately, then if you've got more junk and you get hit with 4 curses or something, that's going to add 2 more silvers to your deck. Now, is that too many silvers? While you can, of course, trash silvers with Trading Post, one at a time by trashing 2 silvers to turn it into 1. You're better off trashing the junk first, of course. And if you do trash all of your 10 starting cards, which you would prioritise to trash, you will end up with like 5 silvers, and that's going to generate you more money than you need for a single province. And if you've got junking attacks, and you're getting those curses, you can end up with like 7 or 8 silvers. Furthermore, usually when you want to try and buy a 5-cost card, you need to add something to your deck that generates you economy, and sometimes that'll be draw, but other times it might be that you just have to open with a silver. And what that means is that you might already have a silver or 2 around, so you can see that you can easily get up to like between like 7 to 10 like silvers in your deck if you're not careful, which is kind of a lot. That's a lot of economy to come from as silvers. So because we have a lot of silvers, Trading Post really wants you to have really good draw. So silver as a card gets better if your draw is really good, and that's just because it's not as efficient in terms of the stop card space that it uses up, how many stop cards you sort of have in your deck, compared to better alternatives like gold or cantrip coins that take up no space at all. In addition to that, Trading Post wants to trash 2 cards, so you have to align it with 2 cards that you want to trash, which is a bit more difficult than other cards like Remodel or Moneylender, because you pairing up 3 cards together is obviously a lot harder than 2. So while at the start it's very easy to align up Trading Post with junk when you've got so much of it, you can find that it starts to get a little bit difficult if you don't have very good draw. So Trading Post, along multiple metrics, it's asking you to really be able to draw your deck quite well to get the most out of it. Alternatively, sometimes there is no draw at all, and you go for more of a big money style deck, like a treasure-based deck. Trading Post can actually be all right in these sorts of decks, so trashing is normally quite bad in those. To give you an example, Chapel plus big money is worse than just pure big money because you just lose time trashing cards for nothing. But in Trading Post's case, it actually gains you the silvers while you do it, and that makes up for the fact that you are spending some turns trashing because you kind of really want the silvers, and you're more than happy to get rid of the estates and get silvers, and you continue to have reasonable turns while adding in all the treasures that you want. So Trading Post is fine actually in money style decks, which generally aren't always that good anyway, but as a comparison with many other cards, Trading Post does reasonably well in those kind of situations. So something that we like to consider a lot when we look at Kingdoms is like how often we want to hit 5. Do we want to buy a lot of 5-cost cards? Do we want to do it fairly consistently and often? A Trading Post is not quite as good at hitting 5 as you might think. So let's imagine that you opened with 5 on your turn 1, and so you buy Trading Post. When you play turns 3 and 4, you actually might struggle to hit 5 again at that time. Part of the reason why is because when you play Trading Post, your hand goes down to 3 cards, and one of them will be a silver. And if you've ever played against Militia, you will know that in the early game, it's actually pretty difficult to hit 5 from only a 3-card hand. So obviously, you're doing the trashing. You're getting more silvers, and that's all giving you the long-term benefit. But in the short term, you may find that you're not quite able to hit the price points that you want. Bear in mind that Moneylender, although that's something you might think is slightly similar to Trading Post, it's not really. The way that it gives you 3 coins is very good for hitting 5, but Trading Post, it's sort of like only giving you 2. If you think that one of the cards you trashed was like an estate, you can see how it's sort of giving you 1 less money compared to something like Moneylender, and therefore it's just a little bit shy of giving you what you need to hit 5 consistently. Assuming that is a concern, of course, it might not be. But what it does do, Trading Post, is it's very good at giving you a middling, reasonable amount of money while you are doing the trashing in the early game. So if you compare a card like Stewards that just trashes 2 cards without any sort of other benefit, usually on turns where you play Steward early on, you just sort of have to give up buying anything at all because you can only get 2 coins, and there might not actually be anything good at 2. So you just sort of skip building your deck in those turns to you make that trade-off that you're going to be doing the trashing, and You're just not building while you do it. Now, with Trading Post, you will hit like 3 and 4 quite a lot, while you're also doing the trashing in the early game. So you are able to actually keep buying other engine parts that you want and other cards whilst you're doing your trashing. Trading Post is really good if you've got nice cards that cost less than 5, especially if you get a Trading Post really early. Because that means you can continue to just buy those nice cards whilst you're also trashing all that junk from your deck. Now, in the long term, Trading Post gives you quite a lot of economy, so as you add draw to your deck and you are slowly thinning all of that junk with Trading Post, what you find is that as you start building up the draw and you start to draw your deck, all of a sudden your turns get really, really good in terms of the amount of money that they generate. They suddenly shoot up to generating quite a lot of money, and that's just because you are starting to add all of these silvers to your deck, and when you start to effectively draw your deck at that point or get close to it, you've got a load of silvers around and you start getting like big amounts of money. You've probably trashed your estate early, and so you might still be drawing some coppers, but that means that even before you've trashed everything, you can start generating like 7 and 8 and stuff, and it just sort of happens suddenly that you're getting these reasonably big turns. And that means that Trading Post really likes plus buy, because that gives you an opportunity to make use of all of this economy that it's adding. In addition to that, we said that it tends to give you more money than you need for single province. So as long as you've got a plus buy around, you get to make use of the fact that Trading Post is giving you quite big, like long-term economy. It adds the economy that you need, or at least most of it that you're going to need to reach to double province. So if you think that you had to like open with a silver or something just to hit 5, then you might end up with like 6 silvers, and that's 12 money, and you're only 4 off of reaching double province. So it's quite easy once you've done all your trashing to just add a little bit more money, and then you're off at double province, as long as you've got that extra buy. Obviously, if you've not got the extra buy, then it's sort of slightly going to waste the amount of the money that you're generating. How does Trading Post fare against other trashers? So Trading Post tends to be worse against other trashers that also give you good turns when they trash. So Sentry from the base game that we've seen, that lets you keep a 5-cost hand while it trashes cards from your deck. And it's also got more use later on in the game. Once you are thin, it skips past all of those provinces that you're buying and so on. Sentry tends to get picked above Trading Post. It's just generally considered more powerful. Similarly, Masquerade is a card in Intrigue that draws you cards and then trashes. And so again, that's a card where you tend to have like 5-card hands, and it sort of precision trashes. It's more likely to trash the cards that you want with Masquerade because you just draw a bigger hand before you trash with it. These also, because they're both drawing you cards, they cycle through your deck more quickly, and they're not adding all these silvers, so they actually help thin your deck in a way. Even though Masquerade is only trashing 1 card as well, it's just drawing cards and it's getting you through your deck faster. So that's usually more important than the long-term economic benefit of Trading Post. Sometimes you want to just get cycling your deck as quickly as possible, and they tend to be better than Trading Post in that regard. Similarly, because Trading Post costs 5, sometimes there are just cheaper trash cards that trash multiple cards. So Steward, Chapel, these are the examples. I guess Chapel is an exception just because it's really, really strong. But Steward, for example, it trashes 2 cards. It doesn't give you a silver, but you can buy it very early most of the time because it only costs 3. And so what happens is you start trashing with the Steward, and then there's just sort of no real reason for the Trading Post. So Trading Post's cost is also kind of a negative against it, just that it makes it, you usually want to trash as soon as you can, and you're just spending longer getting to when you start trashing if you're waiting to pick up a Trading Post, and oftentimes you just want to get that thinning as soon as possible, so it can lose out to those. What about other trashing in forms of what I call cost-relevant trashing? So something that I have done a number of times, fairly often with Trading Post, is that because it's adding you these silvers are a prime target for other trash cards that care about cost. So you can remodel them into 5-cost cards, for example. Now, the big downside that cost-relevant trashers usually have is that they're very bad at dealing with the coppers in your deck. So what Trading Post does is it will turn those coppers into a single, much more expensive card that you can then use for the cost-relevant trasher, and so you can improve your deck a lot more reasonably then. You, instead of having the silver from Trading Post, you sort of get to swap it for essentially something else that would be better for you. Like, that's sort of the plan when you're doing this. And then at the end, you don't have the Trading Post. You have no cards left that you want to trash with the Trading Post. You can just trash that to like your remodel, get rid of it, and swap it for something else. So, I mean, this is sort of something that to some extent applies generally to like silver and gold gainers. They sort of are pretty good with cost-relevant trashers, but in this case, this one card is fueling your cost-relevant trashers, and it's also dealing with the coppers that the cost-relevant trashers don't like. So there's some nice synergies there with cards like that. And just sort of a summary here. So Trading Post, it doesn't thin your deck as well because of the silver gaining compared to other trashers, but what it is doing is that it is giving you this long-term economic benefit, and it's doing okay in the medium term as well for the amount of money you generate. What you are sort of doing with Trading Post is that you are making a trade-off where you're saying that you want less cycling speed, so you take a little bit longer to start getting through all of your deck, but what you're doing is you're giving yourself more coin generation instead. So a question to ask yourself when weighing up Trading Post versus other trashers: are you looking to just play some key cards as often as possible? If that is the case, then you probably don't want Trading Post because it's sort of slowing down the cycling that you'd be getting. Or are you basically okay with a bit of a slower build, but to try and get a lot of big economy at the end and just have your trasher also deal with that part of your building for you? And if that's the case, then Trading Post is pretty good for that. Okay, so that's everything that I have to say about Trading Post. What we're going to do now is we're just at the online client, and as always, we are going to generate some random kingdoms that have Trading Post in it, and we're just going to assess how well this does. Now, these are base and intrigue mixes, now that we've moved on to intrigue, so you will see some familiar cards and a whole bunch of ones that you may not have seen before. So what's going on here? We have Torturer as our draw, and Nobles as well. We have Festival and Nobles as villages. Is Trading Post our only trashing? It looks like it is. So Trading Post is going to be really important here no matter what. So we're definitely going to be getting a Trading Post. We do have to recognise that we've got a fair number of silvers, and also both of our villages do not draw cards when we use it as a village. And there's no, the draw is only terminal. So we're actually going to struggle to draw quite a lot here, but I think it's still worthwhile to try and trash, because you really want to be playing a lot of Torturers, because the attack is quite nasty. It's interesting that Torturer puts junk cards in your hand, so you can trash them directly with Trading Post, but what that's doing is that's sort of giving you even more junk, and so you're just bloating your deck even more. So I think we're going to struggle to draw our entire deck in this board. Lurker looks tempting because we've got really expensive cards like Nobles, but because we're struggling to cycle through our deck a lot, I think we might actually struggle a little bit to make good use of Lurker. It's going to be hard to get two of them in our deck. Is Workshop good? Workshop gets us Poachers. Merchants, I think we can't really make use of Vassal. There's too many silvers because we're going with Trading Post. Anyway, I think overall, yes, Trading Post is a thing we do. We want to try and draw our deck, but we're going to struggle, so we might just have to be okay with only getting one province per turn. We do have 2 buy cards, but I think they are not... It's going to be quite hard to get double province. Maybe we can. Maybe we sort of eventually do it. But it might be easier to just pick up 1 province at a time, because it's going to be too difficult to actually draw a lot, I think. So Trading Post is good here, and the way that it draws you gains you lots of silvers is actually changes our strategy a fair bit. We do have to accommodate for that. We don't really want a lot of them in this case, but we kind of don't have a choice because it's our only trashing. So what do we have here? Again, trading post is our only trashing. Well, there is mine, but mine is considerably worse than trading post in general, so we can just ignore that. We do have artisan, but do we care about artisan? What's our village? We've got nobles and throne room. We've got council room for draw, and we've also got militia, so we're actually okay with drawing here. But the villages are very expensive, and we can't pick them up. Artisan is nice. I guess it's the only... There is a plus buy in council room, but otherwise, what are we gaining otherwise? So I think we're fine. Our first 6 is probably going to be an artisan, and we're happy to just pick up throne rooms if we need to. Or even just merchants, like if we draw it early. But yes, so we are going to be picking up trading post. To get there, I think we're going to be picking up a militia. And I guess we want to pick up a silver. Seller seems quite nice here, just to try and help us draw. Maybe we don't have a problem with draw. I just think we want quite a number of throne rooms, but we could have inconsistent turns. But I think we are able to build up to double province here, and we're probably going to use merchants or conspirators to help us get the extra money that we need with trading post. I think it's going to take us a little while to actually start our deck going, just because we'd really like some nobles, but they're quite hard to get and they're quite expensive. But otherwise, trading post ultimately seems very good for this board because it's the only trashing, and we got expensive cards, so actually it helps give us the economy. We can just focus on trying to get all of the engine components we need. What's happening here? Well, it looks like trading post is the only trashing again. We do have witch. So I think we do witch, even though there's trading post, just because that's going to be bloating our opponent's deck when they're forced to trash it. What is the draw, though? I think that's... Oh, it's witch. So it's not great. Again, seller probably okay here, just because I imagine we're going to have a bunch of junk. But it looks like... I think we do get a trading post first. We can use mill and silver to try and hit a 5, and I think we go for the trading post first. It's important that we try and get our deck under control in this, but then we do want to hit 5 to get witch. We have got regular villages and mining villages, so we can pick up a workshop and we can just start getting a load of villages. We do want an artisan when we hit 6. I guess we just look to eventually hit 6. Maybe what we do is we actually don't open mill, but we open mining village, and we hope to hit 6 with it, but maybe mill and silver's probably just as good. I'm not sure, because if we draw a silver and the mill together, we can hit 6 very easily. But we might be able to do that in mining village too. So when we get the artisan, we can start picking up like a bunch of witches, and we can get a load of villages with workshop, and eventually we will get our deck under control. The cursing... we will get quite a number of witches, so the curses will go pretty quickly, and I think that might be a one-sided junking. Someone's going to get a lot of curses here. And the person who gets their deck under control, if they need more building up, they've got like courtier to do that, and that gives them the buy that they need as well. And they should be able to get up to like a double province. So I think the junking war is important here. I think trading post is critical. I think Duchy Duke as an alternative strategy isn't going to be good enough. Mill is reasonable for something like that, but I think it just drowns in curses and it actually can't hit 5 often enough. So I think you have to go for the trashing with trading post and witch, and then you sort of ignore Duchy Duke. And eventually when your deck is under control, you might be able to like workshop a load of mills if you need to, and you just get extra points, so you just sort of clear just a little bit more in the lead there. So again, trading post very useful here because it is the only trashing, and trashing is good. Makes for a little slower game, but it has a big payoff at the end. What have we got going on here? So we do have another trash card this time, but it is remodel. Remodel seems like it's still going to be pretty good because I see there's bandit for gaining golds. Now we have no village, I notice. But we have got Lab for draw, which is quite nice. So I think, because we can only play one terminal per turn, what we're going to do is we're going to look to get a trading post. We're going to open... Do we bother to open Baron? I don't know if I like Baron that much. Maybe we just open Courtyard Silver. Seems like it might be better than Baron. And then we look to get a trading post, and then we hope to eventually just start buying a bunch of labs. And I think ultimately the payoff, we would be happier to get a remodel. We can remodel silvers into labs, and eventually we can get a bandit. We might be able to gain some gold, and we might be able to remodel them into provinces, and that's sort of how we eventually end the game. I'm not sure how much getting something like Bridge would be better instead, or Baron. I don't know. I think I much prefer the bandit. The bandit will help trash all of the silvers that our opponent has picked up with the trading post, and that'll be quite good. We can kill a bunch of their economy doing that, and they can't really do much else. So yeah, I think trading post is really good here. And its benefits with the remodel to get the labs, and the remodel does well with the bandit. And we just have this courtyard in our deck that we can use if there's a collision to put the trading post back for a little bit. So I think that's that one. I think trading post is really good here. But it is, again, it's sort of the only trashing, and the trashing is worthwhile. So will we see a kingdom that has any other trashing? Yes. Here's one. We've got Sentry. So what's happening here? What is our draw? It is nobles, but there is a problem in that if we are using nobles for draw, then the only village is more nobles. So using nobles as village and draw isn't great. You need to collide two of them to get basically what is a single laboratory play, but it also costs you a lot. What are the attacks? We've got Swindler. I'm a little bit worried about going Duchy Duke when they're Swindler. If an opponent does go for an engine and they play Swindler, they can turn your duchies or dukes into trading posts, and that's going to be really bad for you as a Duchy Duke player. And there's going to be so many turns that I think they're going to be able to actually just destroy a load of your points. So I think you sort of have to go for the engine because of Swindler. But Swindler's really going to hurt if you get your nobles turned into golds. So maybe... what's the worst thing that happens if trading post silver gets hit by a Swindler? I guess they turn it into a vassal, which is pretty bad. Sounds like it's going to be worse than Harbinger, actually, on this board, just because of the no village. So Swindler is just nasty here, but I think what we do is... Do we prefer Sentry? Do we Sentry and then we go Ironworks and we pick up a load of merchants and we try and just get a deck that is like cantrip? We get really thin, we pick up a load of merchants, and we try and just draw to single province. I think there's no plus buy here. Yeah, there's no plus buy here. So I think that's what we do. We try and get to a single province deck using Sentry and merchants, and we just recognise that some of our vassals or our merchants might get chopped into vassals. Actually, it's okay if we do that strategy because we have a high action density, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Maybe they just turn them into a lot of swindlers instead. Do we even then therefore ever bother with nobles? Do we just sort of accept that we're only playing one terminal per turn? Because the other terminals, there's not that many, and Bureaucrat seems pretty bad. Bureaucrat also might work against a Duchy Duke player. I think if your opponent does something like Duchy Duke, you're actually going to get thin with Sentry. You're going to try and get nobles and draw a bunch and play like Swindler, and I don't know if I like Bureaucrat, but I guess it's funny to try that as well. You can actually, that's nice, you can have them top deck one of their duchies or dukes, and then you can swindle it. So wow, so the attack the attack actually matters here, that they top deck it. You can effectively trash. So yeah, I think Duchy Duke is completely doomed. Anyway, I think Trading Post is just bad here. There's better trashing, and you actually don't want to be bloated with silver. I don't think you can effectively province by sort of going like big money. Trading Post, I don't think that's actually any better. I do kind of prefer the control by trying to use these, even though you've got to buy a lot of merchants. I think just the fact that you can get the control and swindle your opponent constantly is going to be really powerful here. So yeah, so this is a board where I think Trading Post just gets outplayed by a better trasher that is available. Anyway, there you go. That was 5 kingdoms with Trading Post in it. As you can see, if it's the only trashing, then you sort of just have to deal with its unique properties. But the trashing is still pretty good. But it loses to certain other trashers. Anyways, I hope this video was useful for you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.